Okay, for those of you listening at home, hi Rainey, excuse me gentlemen. We just skipped like 3 minutes of really tedious stuff like checking things and photocopying things like that. Didn't even know that. If you really, really want to, I'll post the 3-minute as an outtake video, and should be fun. So here's what I'm going to do. 14F, there's still a few people who need to finish this, so I'm going to go through the answers on Monday. Or actually, I'll hand you out an answer. Yeah, Monday, you can check it out. There is one, this is the last high problem of the year, other than possibly on the exam. Yeah, so there's another curveball I threw you. By the way, if anybody needs more light, I'm more than happy to turn that on. It feels a little cooler without them. I don't know if that's just, psychological trick, or whether it actually makes it cooler. But I'll take it. No problem. We're adding degrees of realism. No problem. Jim and I can. We're adding degrees of realism to the problem. And again, double check and make sure you can read this. I don't want anybody straining their eyes. But take a look at page 1. It starts similarly to the 2 other worksheets we had on this. Your scientist's job is to measure and predict the tides at Pebble Beach. You start your measurements at 12 midnight on April 8th, 2023, when you discover some of your data never recorded due to equipment malfunction. This does in fact happen. I'll offer my laptop as Exhibit A. But I digress. I'm going to try and do a brain transplant on that this weekend. But 3 things you know. They did not record the first high tide or the first low tide. The second high tide, they give you the time and the height. It does record that the second low tide happened after the second high tide. It doesn't know where or when, but you know that. And the fourth low tide occurs, oh, by the way, can you scratch off the words, where it says the fourth low tide of the day? Please scratch off the words of the day. Because it actually doesn't, I don't think it occurs on the same day. No, it certainly doesn't, 2 days later. So just scratch off the words of the day in step C rather. That should set us up. Now, how on earth do you do this? Let me give you a couple hints. I'm going to give you a good portion of the hour to work on this, especially since this is going to be the last. I think this is the last homework of the year, if memory serves. Because next week we're going to be doing the practice exam, and then the week after that is final exam. And there we are. And it's not Thursday, Monday, Friday. So if you have a bunch of missing data, how do you handle that? Well, start by drawing a graph, just plain old graph. Suggestion. In your notes, please draw this and make it really, really long. Yeah.
Is this for this?
It is.
Can we do it?
You could, although it'd probably be better if you do it in your notebook, because your graph is going to look a little different than mine. I'm probably going to put a bunch of extra junk around here too, that you don't need to show after writing. And you will probably need every inch of space you have. And I extended it to 2 pages, so I had plenty of room. Let's take a look. It says the second high tide. There is one thing we can mark on the graph. I do not know when the first high tide or the first low tide happened. But I do know the height. Somebody tell me, what's the height of the high tide? Come here, Rick. Go. 7.82 feet. We can at least mark that. And do a dotted line. Make sure it's nice and long. The reason it's so long is that we're extending it over possibly as much as 3 days. So we're going to have not just 24 hours worth, but probably 72 hours worth. So you're recovering from April 8th, April 10th. What's the low tide? Fluid?
3.8 or 3.0.
3.08, yeah, so I'm gonna kind of guesstimate that. 3.08 feet. And put a dotted line. It's nice and long. Now again, this is actually good training. In real life, when you start, machines have a tendency not to behave all the time. I mean, you've had experience with that. You fire up your computer and then, blue screen of death crashes, or something like, oh no, my file didn't save, or I tried to start the car and it clunks, etc. In the lab or in the experimental scenes, same thing happens. Sometimes the equipment just fails. And let's suppose, for the sake of argument, that the experiment cost $5 million to run, taxpayer dollars. So you're hired as a contractor by the federal government to run an experiment. You laid out all the equipment, which is super duper expensive equipment, and then $5 million later, you come back and half the data is corrupted. Now, most people are tempted to panic at that point. They say, I owe the federal government $5 million. This is bad. I'm going to be in jail for the rest of my life. There are ways to salvage. I'm curious if there's enough information to reconstruct the stuff we have here. First of all, we do know the high tide and low tide. Can anybody tell me anything else we can calculate just based on that? Yeah. The baseline. How?
You would add the two together and then divide by two.
Correct. Do the average. Go ahead and do that, everybody. Tell me what you get. And again, if anybody has a hard time seeing and needs more light, let me know. Yeah. 5.45. Bless you. 5.45 feet is the baseline. So that's one of the 4 things we need to reconstruct the graph. There's another thing you may be able to find based on that. Yeah. Amplitude. How do you get that? Yeah. So subtract the 2 tops or the 2 bottom ones, whichever you want. What do you get? 2.37. I agree. So do you see we still have some data, even though a lot of it's been corrupted? We can get a lot. Now, here's where the tricky part comes in. We knew the high and low tide, fortunately. We do not know the time of the high tide, low tide. I want to make a sketch over here. Actually, 2 of them. Does it make sense that sometimes the high tide occurs first in the day, and sometimes the low tide occurs first? Like you might have something like this. You might have something like this. Sometimes the low tide occurs first in the day. Sometimes the high tide occurs first in the day. Does that make sense? And we don't know. Like the data for the first high tide and the first low tide is gone. So we don't even know which one came first. We do know the very first recorded event that wasn't destroyed was what? Sam, help me out. According to what they're describing here, what's the very first thing it recorded? What event? Machinery is running ever since midnight on April 8th. What's it say?
The second high tide.
The second high tide, exactly. The very first thing that was recorded, basically it's saying the first high tide, and then you look for the height and the time, garbage, static. The first thing that actually recorded was the second high tide. And that occurs when? Good.
7:51 p.m.
7:51 p.m. on what?
April 8th.
April 8th. Is that the start day or after? That's the starting date. On your graph, I would strongly recommend you mark 24 here, then 48, then 72. Look at tell me what I'm doing. Okay, why am I doing that? Yeah, that's for each day. From 0 to 24, what day is that? Okay. Yeah, what day? April 8th. From 0 to 24, that's the first day. As soon as it hits 24, you're into April 9th. And then from 48 to 72, this is April 10th. Does that make sense? I would strongly advise that when you do a problem like this, you build it like this. All right, so Sam, back to you. When did you say it happened, the second high tide?
7:51 p.m.
7:51 p.m. on the first day. So, does it really make sense that 12 would be like noon? So 7 p.m. is going to be further along than that. So 7:51 p.m. Can somebody translate that into hours for me? Yeah.
Hours.
19 hours, how do you get that, first of all?
You add 12 to 7.
Yeah, where'd the 12 come from? What told you? Yeah, you're absolutely right, but yeah, the fact that it's PM means it's in the evening, so the morning has gone by. So you got 12, which is for the morning hours, plus 7 plus what? How do you handle this? Right, 51 over 60. That'll tell you what fraction of the hours is. What does that give you? It's like 19 point something. And if it's a horrible decimal, I would leave it as a fraction, but I think this is relatively nice. Yeah. 0.85. So this event is at 19.85 hours. And that is, what was it that happened then? The second high tide. So where would I put the dot? At the maximum, right. So, is everybody okay with this so far? Now, what happens after that? What's the second thing that was, what's the second thing they mentioned, together coming after that?
They mentioned the second low tide. It just happens after the first high tide.
Right, the second low tide happens after the high tide. So the second low, now think back. Basically, they're saying the second high is followed by the second low. Can anybody go back in time and tell me what must have happened before? They didn't record anything about the first high and low tide, but can you tell me what order they came in? Josh? If you go too far, it won't even be the first high tide, it'll be the 0 and then the -1, and then, in other words, off the screen. Which came first, the first high tide or the first low tide? They didn't say. Can we figure from here? The second high tide happened before the second low tide. So go back in time. Yeah, the first high tide happens first. First high, then the second high. And then something around there, it never gets to the low tide, like that's the beginning of the day. Does that kind of make sense? With a little bit of logic, if the second high tide happened first, then the first high tide must have happened first. Because that's the order they come in. Okay? And then, so how do I know it didn't go down one more time? Oops, why did I say second? First. How do I know it didn't go down to a low tide one more time? Abby, what would you say that? How do I know it didn't do this? Take a look here. after.
Or because it's the first low tide.
Yeah, this is the first, well, what am I saying? Wow, I need a name. Okay, this is low, sorry. Yeah, if there had been one that happened before that, that'd be the first low tide. So there's absolutely no way that could have happened. So we know, and someone would know, but okay. Take it to the teeth. Does everyone understand that so far? It kind of makes sense? I didn't have direct data on either the first high or the first low, but the fact that the second high happened before the second low means all the other ones happen in that order as well. The third high is going to happen after the, before the third low, fourth high, fourth low, fifth high, fifth low, and so on. So, why do I mention that? What's the third piece of info? Very clear.
What low tide is the first time?
Okay, so high to 308, we got that. So, what day, what is that again? April 10th, what time of day? 9:03 p.m. Here's April 10th, and right in the middle is noon. Is it before or after that? Yeah, quite a bit after. It's going to be like 3/4 of the way in. 9:03 p.m. And that was a low tide, so you know we put a dot there. Now, part of the issue is that the very next low tide? No, what was it? Yeah, this is like the second high tide. And they said that this was what? It's the fourth low tide. That means a lot has happened in between. I'm curious if anybody can reconstruct what this looks like. The reason, and here's the high tide, here's the low tide, here's the baseline. Start from the beginning, see what we know. Will help me out. What is the very first event that ever happened, even though it wasn't recorded? Was it a high tide or a low tide that happened first? High tide. We figured that out. So it's got to be a high tide. I'm going to put a dot here first. Then what must happen after that? First low tide. First H, first L. Keep going and tell me what happens after. What's this? Second high tide. Then what? Second low. Everybody see what's going on? Keep going. Third high. Third low. Keep going. One more time. Fourth high. Fourth low. Does everybody see why that has to be the case? Since we knew the second high tide and the second low tide happened in that order, all of them are going to happen in that order. The first high tide had to have happened first. This is not the nicest crap in the world that we could run, but there. Why did I do that? Why waste the time scribbling? Well, any ideas? Why doodle like this? But yeah, it's nice when you're kind of, yeah.
Can you find like the period?
Yeah, I need eventually to find the period. Is this a half period? No, it's not a half period. Normally it was. Like if this is the first high tide, first low tide, it swoops right down. Half period, relatively easy. This is much more than that. I need to know how much more. How many periods actually happen in between those two events? Well, we said there was the second high tide and the fourth low tide. How many periods is that? Katie, help me out here. Just physically count them. Like how many periods from here to here? Close. Well, here's one complete period. Like start from the second high tide. Got it. 2.5. Everybody look up here. Here's one complete cycle. One complete period. Here's two complete periods. Here's another half. Don't go up to the third period because we haven't gotten that far. This is 2.5 periods. Write it like this. 2.5 P. Can somebody tell me how long it actually took to go from there to there? This is 2.5 periods, but how much time is that? We do need to find something first. What hour is that? How many hours have gone by at this point? Somebody talk me through it. Like, tell me step by step how to get it. Let me see. Courtney. 9:03 p.m. on April 10th. Like, it's got to be less than 72. Not that much. But how do you find it? Say again? You could. You could go backwards to 72 hour. That would work. It's a little harder. If I go here, how many hours so far? How about here? 48. Now include that. Let's do that. We've got 48, because that's 2 days worth. Plus what? 9. Definitely, although it's 9 what?
So plus the 21.
Yeah, how do you get that?
Well, I just did 12 plus 9.
There you go. The 12 came from the fact that it's PM. And then plus the extra 9, plus what? How do you handle the other 3?
So it'd be 0.05.
Yeah, how do you get that?
I just did 3 divided by 60.
Exactly, 3 over 60. So that's 0.05. And then what's 48 plus 12 plus 9? 0.05. Bingo. I'm not going to talk you through the rest of it. I'll let you do it on your own. But do you see the 2 numbers we have here? Again, the computer doesn't care about our time system. It doesn't count by minutes and seconds and hours. Yeah. Go for it. Just leave the dark crack in the back end. The computer doesn't care. It just counts by raw numbers, like the number of hours. So when you're trying to get the computer to tell you how long it's been, you got to convert it into hours. My next question, don't answer it. Do it on your own. But how long is this? How many hours? It's going to be like something point something. And that's 2.5 periods. 2.5 periods is, I don't know, whatever this is, 50 something, 40 something hours. How do you find the period? Because we will need it for our equation. Okay. Oh, it is. Well, it's 2.5 P equals some number. How do you get P by itself? Divide, is that again? Divide by, this is 2.5 times P, if that helps. Like 2.5 P equals some, I have no idea. It's like 40 something. Let's just say it's 40 something. How do you get P by itself? Divided by P. I want P. I want P by itself. Divide by 2.5. So we clear? Once you get this answer, how long this is, divide by 2.5 and that'll give you the actual period. Go.
Sorry, how did you get 2.5?
Oh, good question. How do I know this is 2.5 periods? Looking here. I know I started at the second high tide.
Right.
1 cycle, 2 cycle, 2.5 cycles. That's the only way I know. Everybody okay with this? All right. And I will prepare you for one last curveball. The problem number 5 is similar to problem number 5 on the last worksheet. I gave you an interval to find at least one time during April 10th. Keep in mind, that's the 3rd day. So it'll be a number between 48 and 72. Then you have to convert it into time of day. Where the tide at the tide was somewhere between 3 feet and 3 feet 6 inches. Any questions? Going once, twice. All right. The rest of the hour is yours. You got about 21 minutes. Go ahead and pound away. You're welcome to work in groups as long as you get the dust back when you're done. And Randy, Godspeed your health. And I'll be posting this on YouTube today, God willing. Pray for the Wi-Fi, by the way. See ya.